it's the same thing we've always kind of come back to on our show, like the idea of how all roads seem to lead back to Gladio, and it's almost like Gladio's this multifaceted op with so many different layers. There's like drug trafficking, sex trafficking, network, like blackmail, like all different. There's satanic elements, and this is kind of one of the best examples of this.
How do you bear to live with what you already know?
I can't say.
You can't say.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the No Way Jose podcast. I am your host, Jose Galison. We are on part 4 of What Really Happened to Dutroux Affair. I am joined today, as always, with this one and many other series that I've done with this fine fellow, Austin Picard. Today, it's kind of almost a second part, I guess you could say, of the last episode, although I think in a way this deserves, it works out that we kind of did it in this way, because I believe this merits its own episode. Seems like we're probably going to mostly be honing in on the 85 kidnappings that set off this whole ordeal. And when I say set off, we were actually talking in the pre-chat about probably a good way to almost envision this is kind of much like the 2016 Sweetheart deal with Epstein, and kind of the, I forget what was it, 2019, 2020, when the second bout went on, and that's kind of when national press kind of took hold, where it's like, hey, you can't do this again. So but we're kind of in this first one in the Sweetheart deal, and we're re-examining. This is a part of the Dutroux Affair that I feel like is kind of criminally under-examined, because there's so much that goes on Dutroux Affair that this is a periphery. Hell, the first 3 parts of the series was mostly stuff that was even before the periphery, kind of the hazy, not well documented kind of stuff, and now we're getting to the periphery of the Dutroux Affair, getting to the 85 kidnappings, what started this all off. And with that, I've riffed enough. Let's get our buddy in here, Austin. What is up, my friend? You ready to get into it?
Absolutely, brother. Once again, as always, with the Dutroux case, we descend back into the darkness, right, every time, and I get this sort of reoccurring emotional state of mind, right, that unfortunately, man, like I will never forget just this specific case in terms of lifelong impact, right, in every way, in terms of just psychologically, philosophically, even just kind of how I view the power structure. I mean, in every way, it really does and has influenced just kind of my outlook and perspective. But I think, as you said, like, just criminally under acknowledged in terms of this original case, as far as his first sort of on the record criminal offenses that were under that sort of umbrella, that very much he obviously just committed very similar crimes in the 90s and post his release from these original convictions, which again, it's just another great example of no real level of accountability, especially at the institutional level in Belgium at this time. I mean, it was just kind of, it's almost like hard to even fathom, right? As far as just how much it seems to be a difficult task to even imagine criminally prosecuting anyone and holding them to the full extent of the law in terms of the criminal consequences of something to this level. But then to be so like effectively kind of like put on this path of really the lowest level of accountability that you could ever sort of imagine having to endure after these types of criminal offenses. That's what blew me away in terms of these original charges. But
We have
But
no current parallel for this now, do we, Austin? There's nothing that's gone on recently that we could draw any sort of comparisons to similar such situations.
hey man,
Never
according to
anyone
Gawain,
getting
Jose,
up. Well, I
Gawain
was
says,
actually speaking about the Alexandrovich thing, although that's still almost starting to feel like maybe that'll be a flash in the pan type thing, although I'm hoping not, because it's such an absurd situation. For those who maybe watch this in the future, because it's an evergreen thing, we had recently in the news the Alexandrovich story, which I know, to be fair, maybe more will come out, but this was a sting. He got busted for some kiddie stuff, trying to contact a 15-year-old girl through, I believe, the Pure app, which I did end up looking up in the morning dump. I did not make an account because it freaked me out, but just looking from the outside, it's a skeevy looking site, and I don't like it. I don't know enough about it, but just looking from the outside looking in. But either way, he tried to pick a 15-year-old, and he was able to skip the country somehow. And even in the charging documents, which came out later, you could see there was a summary of his discussion with it, so it wasn't word for word. So in the interest of fairness here, he hasn't had his day in court, but that's kind of the point. He hasn't had his day in court, and he was able to escape the country.
right.
In the documents, he literally admits how he has a flight, like I think it was the next day or the day after that, and that and that he's in Israel, and that he's so literally listing over and over again repeatedly how he's a flight risk, and then, okay, thank you, sir, you have a good day. Meanwhile, there was, I believe, 8 or 9 other people who got busted in that sting, and every single one of them, maybe, or I believe as of yesterday, I believe at least, or maybe the day before, every single one of them was still sitting in jail. And I think Alexandrovich was that like a week ago or so. So
Right.
I don't expect him to come back for his court dates.
Again, it's the political protection of this sort of pedophile underworld.
Pedopocracy. I'm getting better at
Yes.
saying it.
Exactly.
It's
And
starting to
that's
roll
what-
off the tongue more. The more I
Yeah,
say
good
it, the more I'm
job,
like,
because
okay.
it's definitely difficult. I have not practiced it whatsoever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that it's just par for the course, man. This is this sort of underlying power structure, and I believe to be the top currency in that sort of power structure and the power
He
paradigm.
was literally Intel. The Alexandrovich guy, he was their cyber guy. I mean, I guess it's technically not Intel, but it's basically Intel. He was their top cyber guy. He was the one who literally put in submissions for things to get removed on Twitter and stuff. Like, he is their censorship apparatus, their cyber censorship apparatus, and he was at the highest level of it. It's like, this guy spooked out. Like, you are right. This literally, he is trading the currency. This is the prime example, modern day example of pedopocracy. And then we're kind of now also reevaluating an even better example of all this that kind of ties it all together, the Dutroux Affair. And we're kind of right now, this is where kind of starts. This is the initial demonstration of the whole theme here is how it went under examined, because it wasn't known. It kind of just flew under the radar because people weren't ready for it. Whereas, now with this Alexandrovich and some of the other stuff, we're primed. We've already gone screwed over. So we're looking for it. This is the initial. This is the more trusting populace kind of let it slide, and now we're re-examining this. So to kind of bring us back into kind of I know last episode at the ass end, we did kind of go into what we were going to cover today. So we gave a little bit of a start, but for the interest to recap our audience, we're probably going to start again. I believe it was a 19-year-old and 11-year-old kidnappings. Those were the initial ones we're starting here. These are the first things. This is what we're going to be re-examining. So I don't know if you're going to lay out the initial facts of the case and then kind of go into, there's definitely a lot to examine here. A lot that is weird, that really has not really been, from what I've seen, been attempted to be dug into much by not too many research. So I don't know. I'm looking forward to digging this.
Not really whatsoever, honestly, that I've come across, just in more of like, you would think that it would have at least have been mentioned in some of the other. I would just say, like, there's been a lot of different content that's attempted to cover Dutroux.
To be clear, as I said before, in the interest of fairness to all these, I'm not even throwing shade. There's so much stuff to this, and I've laid out, like, well, this is like, there's a lot of interest here, but it's not that surprising that people haven't gone this deep, because there's so much even just in the prime meat of the Dutroux Affair to re-examine. So this is on the periphery. So I just wanted to say that I'm not throwing any shade. I'm just saying this is a spot that is ripe for examination.
Absolutely. And I think that most people, obviously, they focus in on and prioritize the crimes that he was convicted of in the 90s, right? Which obviously it makes sense. It seems to be the just one, it was the moment in time where you had the just extraordinary reaction to one, the lack of the criminal trial really being pursued at any real level for quite some time, and it was kind of unprecedented. But we'll get into all of that later on. I just feel like that is the reason, because there's so much to just the kind of the case and the scope in terms of just the early 90s on, let alone digging into sort of the past in terms of the Dutroux case, because I feel like that's usually always where you find the most pivotal smoking guns as far as how the network kind of functions, and the most pivotal members within that framework. And that's another reason why I tried to at least attempt to pry back the veil a little bit.
On that note, I think that part of why I take so much interest in something like the OKC, like where we're focusing in now on this initial case, so it's under examined. This is at that like the critical juncture where they had a little bit of their guard down. I mean, they had their guard down kind of throughout. They never really put it up that much, but they really had their guard down here. And I mean, I'm kind of making assumptions because I haven't dug into the meat of this like you have, but I have a feeling maybe there's going to be a lot more here of like they were being more sloppy. And so that's kind of why I take personal interest in something like OKC. I always put it in terms of where the the technology was at that time. We were kind of in the early days of kind of VHS, and like so there were recording apparatuses out there, but the means it wasn't really like a high end version of it, and there wasn't really a good way to kind of collate all of this and kind of distribute it amongst each other, kind of in the way that we do now with the modern internet and all this stuff. But it was out there, and so now it's kind of coming in together. Now we're able to kind of piece these things together now because we have these things, but we still have that raw data back from the 90s. So we kind of caught them a little bit in this prime time where they had their pants down in a little bit of a way because we had this stuff. And I think maybe we might have a little bit of dynamic of this with the Dutroux stuff. Maybe not so much because it was a little bit earlier. Not so much as specifically in the component of like technology kind of catching their pants down, but more just the nature of how overt they were being in their actions, really. Much there, yeah.
Yeah, I think they were very confident in as far as the level of protection they truly had in terms of the local officials and the police protection, truly, honestly. Like, again, as I mentioned, I think at the end of last episode, essentially you have members of the gendarmes and local police officials who essentially claimed that they were approached directly by Dutroux himself. And essentially he tried to recruit. Now they later went on the record and made those statements, but obviously for years they were silent and never came forward in terms of that specifically taking place, as far as Dutroux being the individual to actually have attempted to recruit police protection for the abductions that were taking place in regard to the network itself. And that makes a lot of sense because so many different kind of specific cases, and as far as the abductions are concerned, in regard to Dutroux, you had that allegation attached to it, which was there was a level of police protection that was being alleged by the apparent victims.
And I want to hone in on something that I was kind of my fault. Maybe we were going to later the episode. It kind of flew over my head that I was re-listening to the episode yesterday. You mentioned in I believe one of the previous things where they essentially raped some old lady. I forget that case. That there was that claim that he said something along the lines of you overheard him saying something about like legal loopholes or something, and from his studies and this and like having some sort of deep knowledge of this. And I just think there's something interesting to that. And then we add in the component of the familiarity with the gendarmes, the supposed he was reaching out to people to work with them. I mean, I don't know if we've actually gotten to this before, but we'll obviously get into this in future episodes. There's all sorts of I believe there were multiple, at least one incredibly overt example, and I believe there were multiple other ones of literal. And I think I want to say there were multiple informants surrounding him at the time that were directly reporting to the gendarmes with like literal documented examples of them saying, yeah, I think he's doing X, Y, and Z, and crazy overt things, and being like, well, they're just sitting on this information from multiple sources in multiple gendarmes, and it's like, what's going on here? It's just kind of like it's a level of like dropping the ball that's just like unbelievable.
Right. So. Yeah, there were at least 5 separate witnesses that were, deemed to be entirely credible. One of which was even actually his own mother, Dutroux's own mother, right? Who later attempted to blow the whistle and call the authorities and claim that that her own son had been abducting children and kidnapping them and keeping them in a dungeon in his basement. That's what she claimed.
Which is what he was doing. Yeah.
Yeah. And and this is like just leading up, obviously, to the most prominent aspect of the case itself in the after he's already been released from the original convictions from the 80s and this, so early 90s is whenever this took place. But still, it's fascinating that was occurring, obviously, even leading up into after it had already been so very much exposed, that it was still taking that much time, for a lot of this to come out and individuals to come forward. And that makes a lot of sense also when you consider how many bodies were dropping, especially. I mean, that's another thing that I realized just recently in studying this was that the death started after the 80s case, after the convictions really.
We're probably going to have to do multiple episodes just on the suspicious deaths, probably. You know that, right?
It seems that
this
way.
This is going to be like a damn near 12-plus part series, the more I'm thinking about it.
Earlier, and I was like, man, we could do like some sort of long form series in a type of way that could legitimately extend longer than I think both of us would kind of at this moment even be able to sort of conceptualize, because I'm telling you,
there's so many different weird nodes to hone in on, because there's like, as the more you think about them, like we could spend an episode probably on the Abraxas cult. We could probably spend an episode on, I mean, all sorts of different weird things, and I'm sure. But I mean, it seems we're kind of meandering sort of in a semi chronological manner. But then as we're going through, we're recognizing certain things that we probably will need to hone in maybe on and give their own episodes or something at some point. So.
Right.
Maybe we'll have to back up through as we go through this, and as we determine like, because I do think at some point, like as we've mentioned, I do think at some point we'll probably do like a little bit of the the old TV sitcom, the wavy thing, and then now we go and now it's 20 years back, and you're like, we're gonna do a little bit of a flashback. I think for maybe certain characters like maybe Nihul or other ones that maybe we even go. There might be other ones that we're not even thinking of that as they get introduced, we'll go, oh shit. We need to back up and give him his own episode.
I'm telling you right now, we're even considering the X dossier and members of as far as like the allegations made, family connections. We're talking this sort of now something that just recently has occurred to me and been reinforced through these various examples, which is this family dynamic of this sort of dynastic pedophile factor that's playing in that seems like we're talking generations of cyclical abuse, man, that at a level that it's difficult to even imagine, but for it to be sort of well conditioned into the obviously the individuals who fit that mold to a certain level, to where you're talking a type of sociopathic behavior that it has to be generationally sort of implemented. You know what I mean?
This goes all the way up to the king. The king is implicated in there. And then, man, let's be real. Once you get to that level, we're talking. And I mean, I don't remember offhand if the Rothschilds are anyway implicated, but let's be real. I mean, and then you tie that back into the modern day, and it's like, dude, Epstein's was literally, I forget the specific. I've totally covered the show. I forget how, but he's like literally done, I believe, some sort of business for the Rothschilds. But let's be real, he's probably some sort of Rothschild agent of some sort. Okay. And then we have this going on too at the highest royal level, which is, I mean, I know it's not a 1-for-1, but it's damn near. If we're talking like kings of nations, like you're already at the, like, let's be real, the nexus of like international lending and the elite. Right. So like you're basically there.
Yeah, Michel Nihul, he straight up said that he had tapes on King Albert. I mean, that's if that's legitimately the case, and it seems to have been that as far as that well entrenched, then, and I mean, what did he tell Der Spiegel? It was like in 2001, he gave a statement to Der Spiegel, and this sort of quote was from in the network of dossiers, right, about the Belgian X-Files, and he says, "I control the government," Everyone has compromising dossiers on one another to be used as leverage in the right situation. This is the Belgian disease. That's what Michel Nihoul says himself, right? And when you see how just, how he was able to escape any consequence or any accountability whatsoever, he himself, I believe, it's such a perfect window into the level of political corruption and again, this very, oh my God, this is what I wanted to tell you. This blew me away. I was reading earlier about essentially just this model, right, of one, how U.S. intelligence could have potentially connected to the Dutroux Affair, right, which I think it's without a doubt. I'm waiting to find like a real smoking gun that is clear and obvious that we can shout at the rooftops, but from the rooftops, but at the same time it's getting close. I feel like we're on the right track, and we're kind of following the proper breadcrumbs, in a certain way, and you see all of this evidence of these entrapment operations and these strategic sort of underhanded sexual blackmail right tools that are very overrepresented in the power structure. And this is so well represented if you're considering just that very playbook represent or just sort of revealing itself in Belgium at this very time, right? And then you hear those quotes, like something that Michel Nihoul would just claim that I said, which is just fascinating to catch a sort of just again, it's a glimpse at kind of just the overconfidence, but there's a reason they would have that sense of confidence, honestly, when you consider how long they were obviously protected from any exposure whatsoever, committing some of the most extraordinary, diabolical, sinister crimes you could ever imagine. And this allegedly, and if you're considering how Paperclip played a role here, and how I believe that, honestly, you could legitimately tie this back to some sort of World War II post-war footprint of how these brothels were then managed and sort of like exported into various regions for political fucking blackmail. It seems like that's what they were doing, and that like they pitched this idea to Alan Dulles and these sort of usual suspects, and they said this is honestly fascinating and extraordinary, and it meets every single sort of fundamental strategic notion that we would hope to achieve.
I mean, with war comes debauchery. A lot of people don't realize this. I was for a little bit of my background, for the people like maybe think I'm not like saying this personally. I was in the military for like about 11 years active duty, did a couple of reserves, and I deployed once. So, but I worked as a aircraft mechanic, so I was on the flight line. So it wasn't like every now and the most I heard, the most authentic deployment to anything or like Middle Easterners, I could at certain times of day I could overhear from the distance. That was it. That was like, but then I just went to go on a military base and just went and turned wrenches. That was it. So I didn't experience that, but I can tell you. But even there, I mean, there's a certain level of debauchery, not so much. But this is the idea. These are young men being taken away from their fucking their significant others, or even if they're single, they're being put in new environments in which they know they're only going to be there temporarily. And then if you do actually, and I'm just talking about an environment that's not even that's even absent violence, but now you throw in the violence, and things can get pretty dicey in war. Like I was actually. Me and my wife were watching Dante's Inferno that somebody made from the video game. They made a version of it, and that's based off of like a poet, or it was kind of like one of those long form like
Dante Alighieri.
And in that he like cheats on Beatrix or whatever because he's in war, and the idea is they were given like this blanket pardon by the whatever the priest, but like they kind of. You can almost sympathize from a awful carnal of being put in this like I have to, and they're even brainwashed this idea of like, on the Crusades, we have to murder, murder, murder. And then he kind of goes into how there was like literally a captive people. There was a woman who was like begging for like mercy for the people. And like, so he's kind of been taught cruelty, and then he's also been taught he's been absolved of his sins. And then now you have the situation where you have this woman that's kind of coming on to him. And so now he's lost his purity for his loved one, Beatrix. And so it's like this great portrayal. But I mean, I do think it kind of does underscore the concept. And he kind of goes into that. I thought it was really interesting in that as I was watching that. And I think they do apply some of the actual prose from the poetry. It's not just the video game nonsense. And just the idea of how he even uses the excuse of how war changed me. And there is something to that. I mean, what do you expect when you take men away for typically, and actually, I mean, in modern day war, in the context, usually the military will deploy for 6 months, maybe a year. But I mean, they'd be gone for years. And it's like, what do you expect men to do when they leave their family for years and go commit awful acts? They're going to find ways to physically find comfort, and it may not be necessarily be good. I mean, I think you kind of have to put yourself in that mindset, understand like how someone deals with stuff like that. And then the other, I mean, you find ways to justify it. You're going through a hard time. You're like, you might die. You're like, I mean, so, I mean, there's a lot going on. My point, and point being in there that kind of, and that kind of drives in the idea of like, let's think World War II. I mean, there's always these kind of allusions to brothels or women who would sleep with Nazis and stuff like that. And so, I mean, you kind of apply that concept of you have the debauchery from war, and then just kind of it wouldn't be that crazy to then perfectly dovetail that. I mean, let's be real. You go, well, you're gonna what was the whole post World War II situation was like literally kind of re-examining assets and kind of everyone grabbing their boards off the table or their pieces off the table and going, this is mine, that's mine, this is mine. And I think someone got the network of prostitution, which probably has a little bit of dark underbelly that applies a lot of what we're talking about here. We may have mentioned here before too how there even was a lot of was an illusion of maybe a program to kill type stuff going on during this period as well. So with prostitutes. So while we are talking about child prostitution and stuff a lot here, I think it's also important to remember like there's probably for every one of these awful child cases we're talking about, there's probably like 10 plus of some adult woman who's been churned through this process of sex trafficking. I mean, most of them may even have started at a younger age, too, or even if they did start as adults, they still are getting churned through. They're still getting used. Many of them even being maybe used in snuff films. Maybe some of them just casual prostitution. But there's some degree that to some level they're kind of into this miasmic vague thing, this apparatus, and even if it is just a casual, I sleep with occasionally, I might get paid to sleep with a bureaucrat of some sort here and there, and it's just a kind of casual thing, but that it's kind of a sliding scale. So
absolutely,
so and you got to think the chattel of this operation are the casual hooker probably.
Yes.
So yeah,
I think like when you see, I mean, we've talked about the Elm Guest House and 82 and Kinkora as well, which were just very similar in that way, where you have, again, you have members of British Parliament who are entirely implicated in being, we're talking some of the highest levels of Parliament who are implicated again as being compromised as pedophiles in the network and the Elm Guest House affair, which has been labeled a huge hoax. But then years later, decades later, a new investigation reveals that actually there's a lot of reality, and it seems as if many of those individuals were directly attached to, a legitimate pedophile, human compromise, political blackmail operation, right? And by the way, did you not just see that insane? What was it? That insane?
The Indian thing?
Oh no, it was the Las Vegas judge. So we were just talking about what's his name?
I haven't had a chance to cover it yet. I'll probably cover it this week sometime. Yeah.
It's so interesting, right? But again, it shows what was she claiming, that this was a sex trafficking operation that she was attempting to expose before being forced to resign, where they were allegedly targeting the children of Vegas government officials. That is a perfect window into the exact very same playbook that this entire case revolves around and centers around. And so for me, I feel like this is almost a tale as old as time, as they say,
Yep.
right? And how many different examples can we sort of stumble across before we have to admit the ugly truth, you know? And at this point, it seems like, how else would you attempt to reinforce such a dystopian framework? I mean, wouldn't you have to essentially degrade yourself, or at least stoop to that level in order to kind of like keep the assets in their proper position at a certain level, right? I think that's sort of the name of the game. And when you mentioned Dante's Inferno, I remember, I forget which episode it was. I began with that. I began with a quote from Dante Alighieri. I said the hottest. Forget how he specifically, the terminology, the language he used was far more flowery, and I thought beautiful. But he basically just claims that the hottest places in hell are reserved for those who in times of great moral crisis, maintain their neutrality. And in my mind, man, I can't. It had to have been maybe the Concora, something to that effect. I can't remember when I covered that and when I used that quote, but it was because I felt as if the time has come. Like I am now at the point of no return. I have no choice in this anymore. You know what I'm saying? It's like we are in a great time of moral crisis, and I believe that at this moment, I am obligated. You know, and
I mean, as soon as I find out they're
Yeah.
fucking kids, I gotta go. Hey guys, they're fucking kids,
right?
Like I know I'm laughing, but it's because it's ludicrous, and it's
Honestly,
I have a sick sense of humor, but it's like obviously it's awful. But to get back to the sick shit.
I'm coming back.
Okay, I was just
I'm
gonna say,
coming.
to bring it back to the original question, paused it 30 minutes ago. Can you give us a
I will-
recap of the 85
Absolutely,
kidnapping?
dude. Absolutely. But I will say that the lowest level of hell, right, in terms of Dante's Inferno, I mean, it's essentially betrayal, right? And at least in a way, that's how it's sort of described. And the ninth circle, right, which again, like that, I thought the ninth gate, right, the Polanski film where it's all about this strange sort of satanic prophecy.
Well, the
And,
end, if I recall correctly, is very much it's been a while, and I haven't finished the movie just now, and it's kind of, I think it's some sort of symbolic. The last circle very much becomes like a symbolic wrestling with himself of some sorts. So it is interesting you bring it there, especially since many of the themes of the people that we're digging into here is very much about ego and grappling with the self. Although this kind of takes a inverted twist on it, kind of the, oh well, you grapple, well instead, well that I let my Lucifer side or whatever, run free type deal or whatever.
It was also, if you remember, he was like lured into performing a fertility sex ritual with essentially a sort of demon who that the woman, right? I can't remember which Lilith of some kind. I can't remember which sort of demon she represented in the film. It escapes me at this moment. But I remember when we talked about it, I discussed it at a sort of a deeper layer of detail. But I do recall that, effectively, he was seduced into effectively pursuing this sort of strange fertility satanic ritual of some kind, which would then, I believe, open the ninth gate and essentially stage what seems to be the age of Aquarius, the new age, this sort of coming. It was basically claiming that this is the ritual that is necessary in order for the prophecy to be ultimately fulfilled. I can't recall now which ritual it technically was, but it's very interesting. And again, it was like one of the most uncomfortable moments in cinema, as far as like, okay, so
I just remembered, because it's been so while, but I just remembered the symbolism at the end was kind of culminated to almost like a wrestling with Lucifer type deal, almost type of symbolism. And I just found it interesting. The theme that we're covering is the idea of like coming to that final battle, but instead of, the difference here is the Queenos of the world. They would say, oh no, you need to come to terms with your dark self. or
Right.
whatever. You need to integrate that into you need to integrate your shadow into your ego or whatever stupid fucking woo woo they use. Whereas, like, obviously, the more religious, well, I'm not religious perspective would be more like, no, you need to wrestle with that part of yourself. Like, you need to
Yeah.
subdue that. Like, you need to be a strong man that has control of that. And and I think there's something to that. I mean, maybe there's a
Oh, yeah.
reason why we kind of got drawn into the metaphors of Dante here. Although, yeah,
Definitely.
it does seem like maybe I need to re-examine that because maybe it did get a little bit weird there at the end.
Oh, it does. It's very strange. And if you remember, it's at that Knights Templar abandoned castle, and
Oh
essentially it's at
yeah.
that specific time where the sun meets and essentially the fire starts in the
Oh.
castle, and there was a death ritual basically that was seemingly the blood ritual had to be attached to the fertility ritual, which would then sort of usher in the demonic age, this sort of the age of Aquarius. Yeah, I'm trying to remember now, but we'll have to talk about it again
Yeah.
at a deeper level, because I remember it being 100% she was representative of some sort of entity. I can't recall now what it
Like
was, but
Sophia from like Gnosticism or something.
it was something to that
Yeah.
effect. Yeah, but
Mm.
I can't recall for the life of me.
Which
I'll have
I
to.
might even be butchering that because I think Sophia was like I don't even remember. There's supposed to be like some sort of pure life energy or something. I forget. Whatever.
Right.
Anyways, back
But
to what
but here's
happened in
the deal.
85.
And I know. So, but what I really wanted to tell you though, because I
Yeah.
thought it was fascinating, and it was basically that essentially this sort of strategic playbook was offered up and presented and pitched sort of in a way to the usual suspects, one of which was Sidney Gottlieb, another Alan Dulles, and then allegedly Richard Helms was a factor as well. He played a role in kind of help facilitating it at the very least. And so it turns out that basically you had this is according to the assistant deputy director of operations for the CIA, Robert Crowley, and he has this in phenomenal quote. And think the finders, okay? So keep that in mind, just in terms of this quote alone. Oh, we do have our stable of weird people working for us. Did I ever tell you about the pedophile academy? We actually had one down at Camp Peary, right near the CIA's Jim Critchfield's place. This is what he says. I don't know if you are aware of it, but we called it the farm. And it was supposed to be a secret training center for young agents. Anyway, Alan Dulles set up the training center down there for pedophiles. They were in training to seduce, molest, and most especially photograph the young children of targets. Photograph the young children of targets. That's very interesting. Hey, everybody, stop taking pictures of your children and voluntarily putting them on Instagram. I'm just telling you, it's probably a really bad idea. And I'm just, look, live your life. But I'm also telling you there are risks that you're running, and I think that it's far more of a threat than the average person is willing to even imagine, and
Mm.
and that is by design as well. But at the same time, be careful, man. So anyway, this notion just stuck out to me, and so then he claims, and this is Robert Crowley again, assistant deputy director of operations for the CIA. He says, not only as far as them sort of prioritizing targeting the children of these individuals that they were hoping to obviously compromise. He says Alan Dulles, that the graduates would have a good time, but they could get apparently wonderful action pictures of the wee ones to blackmail their families with. I understand they broke it up when one of the graduates nailed a CIA deputy director's son at a summer camp. This is a quote, man. He said, oh, and we mustn't forget the goat boy. That's the strange Dr. Sidney Gottlieb. We called him that because he lived in a hovel and kept a bunch of goats around. He used to have sexual affairs with them. This is what now. I don't know how much we can just believe the obvious allegations being made here by Robert
I'm
Crowley,
wondering if that's coded language. Although it's weird because he wasn't using coded language before, so it's like
right?
so because it's like I don't know. I think what do you call a kid? What do you call a goat?
Yeah, exactly.
A kid.
Exactly, man.
So like, but at the same time, I'm like I don't know. He was literally someone at a pedophile camp, so it's like I feel like he'd almost just say it.
You would think so.
So like, I
Especially
don't
when
know.
he's legitimately saying that, like, and the farm. I mean, come on, man. I said that consider the finders because I remember you called me just the other day and we talked about it briefly, and I basically just said that Marion Petty, he knew this individual by the name of Charles E. Marsh, who played a pivotal role and allegedly ran one of the top private intelligence networks around this period of time. And so allegedly his mentor, Charles E. Marsh's mentor, was Edward Mandell House. Okay. And so this individual had allegedly negotiated the Versailles Treaty and was a confidant of President Woodrow Wilson, and allegedly was directly implicated in being a part of creating the Federal Reserve. And so, if that's legitimately connected directly to the mentor,
Every single time.
are
I can
you
just guess.
kidding me? That's what is happening, you know?
Yeah.
And so then you have Marsh, Charles E. Marsh, who's mentored by Edward Mandell House, who's confidant of President Woodrow Wilson and allegedly implicated in the foundation of the Federal Reserve centralized federal banking system. He just so happens to be the individual who gives money to Marion David Petty, who would then utilize this money, who was this gifted to him, to purchase the hundreds of acres of farmland in Culpeper County, Virginia, which obviously Marion Petty would refer to as the farm. And if people aren't aware, the CIA's training grounds, which were very nearby in Virginia as well, they also referred to him as the farm, as far as that was concerned, which is just fascinating. And especially if you consider,
wasn't one of the pedophile places in Eye of the Chicken Hawk referred to as like some sort of farm? I feel like there might have been a couple of them referred to as farms. There's a few little locations. I swear they were always some sort of farm, summer camp, work, some sort of mixture of that, like a work camp, religion, something. It's always something along those lines, which I mean, that makes sense. That would be some sort of scheme along that way. How do you get a bunch of young boys or girls together and other than under the auspices of some bad kids were straightening out or some sort of work program or something like that. So, or religious camp or whatever. So,
right. And if you consider what came up in the Podesta emails, right, when the leaks happened and during Pizzagate, and essentially it was exposed that basically you had just this fascinating evidence, essentially, that basically Tamara Luzzatto was procuring the children for obviously they pool parties, right? But is what they would claim in some of the coded language they would use. But it was very strange. And again, I believe they referred to her operation as a farm as well, because essentially she was procuring these children and she was then advertising and promoting them in this underhanded, sort of disguised, coded pedophile language again, which they seem to have been able to get away with to some extent, and that's fascinating to me with the amount of surveillance, and digital archives available in terms of investigative leads of any kind. Like, you would imagine that just they would be scouring these pedophile promotional materials, and at the very least, I mean, that's another thing that concerned me whenever I covered the Pizzagate sort of coded language. I just thought they're clearly going to have to pivot away from this and create a new sort of code for pedophiles, because otherwise this is no longer going to be viable, and clearly you're exposed at this point. So
they don't care.
Yeah, it seems that they don't, which is very interesting to me, and it kind of lends to the idea that it almost feels as if they're protected class at a certain level. And I don't see, I mean, the only real pedophiles that seem to be kind of really held accountable are individual sort of lower level
Yeah.
perverts,
The
who
the ma and pa operations.
yeah, the mom and pop pedophiles, exactly. That's
I know
so
it sounds awful to say, but it's like they're cutting out the middle class.
It is fucking terrible, but it's true though.
It's awful. That's
It's just-
awful, guys. No,
yeah,
but yeah, see, they're
I
just
know.
they're shutting out the middle and lower class, and they're giving all these pedophile jobs to the elites. That's what's going
Right.
on here.
Okay, so I'll
Yeah.
get back to the actual Dutroux case, but I did think that was. I know
45
we're
minutes
45
in.
I'm sorry, dude.
You're good.
But
Hey, I enjoyed the conversation so far.
I know, right? I thought it was important, and still, it just goes to show like how many different obvious examples there truly are as far as the overlapping nature of these criminal cases. There's a reason, and in my mind, it's not only the pattern recognition. It's not only this is the effective playbook for individuals who just sort of function in that criminal underworld. No, it's not that. It seems as if there's a legitimate sort of a very well entrenched, fabricated and not fabricated, manufactured, I would say, sort of just there are all of these different measures in place where they will 100% sort of achieve their goals in terms of facilitating cover-ups, right? And whenever they seem to even fail at the really just the greatest examples of an ultimate overall failure in terms of attempting to not have the network overexposed, they still find a way, right, to where they will inevitably pin it on this sort of sole perpetrator path of the patsy that they always seem to leverage on, obviously, and exploit on their own behalf in that same exact sort of framework, right, for the sole purpose of that manufactured false narrative, obviously being to misdirect public perception in terms of the overall network and criminal enterprise. And so again, it's just like, man, come on. It's difficult for me to imagine that you have that sort of example individual who is so in just again, how many times can we have individual spooks who seem to have these sort of ethical they're at an moral crossroads to some extent, because it feels as if maybe they witnessed something that sort of shocked them enough to wake them up from their stupor in a way to where they became willing enough to consider the idea that I can't compartmentalize this enough to where ethically, right, I can still sleep well at night. And I think, yeah, there have to be examples of that happening, right, where people legitimately have been just entirely conditioned within the context of the institutions to where they truly do believe that they're pursuing the proper moral path, and that in sort of fulfilling their role on an individual level in the institution, they're helping prop up and facilitate the overall institutional fabric of modern society itself, and it's in this sort of ethical, morally entrenched foundation. But in reality, it obviously we've witnessed many different individuals in that same framework wake up and become whistleblowers and break free from that sort of prison ideologically, and realize there's a way out. There's an alternative. You can opt out, and you don't necessarily have to fall into that trap. And but again, it's still difficult, because I'm just saying, like, in terms of attempting to know, who is acting in good faith and who you can rely on as a source. It's always going to be difficult, and you always have to be skeptical. But I do try to, obviously, effectively attempt to just interpret and have this sort of like radar in terms of the character profile of an individual. Do they, and so anyway, I do think that as far as Dutroux, it's interesting how much I had mentioned last episode that he was like involved at this sort of weird level with financial crimes as well, and he was even I think they called him like a first class schemer or something to that effect, and that he would find basically any way to manipulate the system and make some sort of money out of it. But I also feel like as a convenient way to kind of just almost misrepresent the level of sophistication. I think he was a very intelligent person. I think Marc Dutroux is actually far more intelligent than you would want to imagine. I mean, it's like maybe the Bernard
Crafty.
Weinsteins of the world and people like that who were clear accomplices that seem to just be like disgusting trash people that wanted to commit rape and have easy access to children and clearly had no real ethical concerns whatsoever. Clearly Dutroux could kind of like utilize those individuals to his own benefit, and I think run roughshod over some of them. He clearly had that sort of mentality. If you listen to his siblings, obviously they claimed he became a tyrant once the father left the household. So if he sort of like you know at the very least, I would imagine that didn't change much going into his adult life. And as far as there's another reason why you would have to believe, at least I sort of naturally believe the allegations of abuse that his first wife made, claiming that it was an abusive household, and after he left and essentially left her with the kids, that it was a definitely a victory because he was essentially the tyrant of that household as well. But again, he cheats on her with Michelle Martin that he meets at one of these ice skating rinks allegedly. But it's just like he was. And by the way, I found another additional note on the ice skating rink connection there, and I found this fascinating because it seems like he already had this sort of legal protection in a way, because if you remember, he was assaulted by by the girl's boyfriend, who obviously is trying to protect his girlfriend that is sexually been assaulted by Marc Dutroux. And but this is so crazy because this is, and keep in mind, right, it's just after his divorce that allegedly he's proven to have committed the first abductions, right? Which that's interesting to me. You know what I mean? Like it feels as if he was clearly already pursuing this strange, sinister path. But as soon as he kind of rids himself from that original family dynamic that he had with his first wife and his children, he goes full animal and turns into that beast, right? That monster. And and it's very interesting because once again, it's like these abductions are taking place by early June, right, of like 85, I believe. And they're happening with, well, first of all, he kidnaps an 11-year-old with Jean Van Petegem, who I had mentioned last episode, which is the individual who has a strange military background, who lived with Dutroux for a time and was one of his accomplices. And if you remember, obviously, he's convicted. I believe it was in November of '88. Dutroux is convicted, and it was for the kidnapping, photographing, torturing, and raping of 5 girls between the ages of 11 and 19. And along with that conviction, he's convicted for torturing an old woman, which I had told you about as well, I think a couple times. And this was allegedly for some sort of robbery, but as if he was forcing her to give him money. But that's when obviously he tortures her and shoves a razor blade in her vagina, and that just, to me, I mentioned it before, it consistently resurfaces as one of the forms of abuse in this specific network, which is just strange to me, the level of torture. But and obviously the individual who sort of provided or presided over the original sentencing and everything, he was the Minister of Justice. It's Wathelet.
He was the first one. Yeah, because he comes into play later, I believe. So it's important to remember this name. Yeah. So
exactly.
Because keep in mind, the people doing the cover up in the beginning, like, what do they do later? I mean, I don't even remember specifically what they do later, but I'm just saying, keep an eye on this for the audience to remember this. There's going to be multiple names. It's a little bit confusing. There'll be, I think, other characters like this too that, like, hey, keep an eye on them because they're going to move. They're going to move in weird ways. And you got to remember things they've done in the past. When you're like, you may not have thought of them. You're just like, oh, that was just some gendarme or some judge. But you're like, okay, well, Pay attention because they might do some weird stuff later. And then you have to re-examine, like, who is this person? There's a lot of that. A lot.
Oh yeah, yeah. I
Which
was catching names that
yeah.
were just reoccurring, as I was reading through the various sources, and they would just continually resurface. And a few years later, you're like, hold on, that's the same individual who presided over the original and facilitated the original cover up, and the sort of lackadaisical. Obviously, they were very, in my mind. If you're considering the actual sentencing and the criminal accountability of Dutroux, talk about the lowest threshold, right, of accountability being met, and then sort of releasing a monster back into the wild and expecting nothing to happen. That was not at all. Even the psychiatrists, every single person who was involved with that first original release were like, "This is a bad idea."
When you have a name like Melchior, your name is to serve evil. So you're like, whatever. We let pedophiles go with over here, Melchior Wathalet.
It's so crazy.
That sounds like an evil person, like Melchior. That's like a demon's name, I swear.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
truly.
Anyways,
so Dutroux and Pettigem, they're handed like a 13.5-year sentence. At least Dutroux was, and it was only like 6.5 years for Pettigem. But here's how the sort of initial, if you're considering the initial rapes and the abductions that were allegedly committed, right, in this context, it really all begins in early 85, as I mentioned, right? Especially it's like around the early summer of 85, right? And so essentially you had these individuals come forward, though, as far as there was testimony given and by late December of the same year, 85. But but yeah, it's very strange because it seems like he's Dutroux. All of this begins to take place whenever Pettigem moves in with him, and Pettigem. It's strange to me because when he's confessing everything before he mysteriously dies in a fire, and he dies in his caravan catches fire, and he just burns alive. Yeah. So, and this is just before he's set to testify.
Stays in it, yeah.
Which is just the craziest story. But again, this is when it's alleged that he was a member of a gang, right? Because he's clearly hanging around with multiple accomplices that he's engaging in these criminal sort of just these various, crimes of abuse, right? Let alone he's already abducting the children, but he's convincing Pettigem. This is according to him.
Well, but to back up real quick, just to clarify, you said Pettigem dies later in a fire. Now, is this in the later stuff when they start digging into it? Is like when, or is this in this initial bout, like these 85 kidnapping legal proceedings where he dies, or are we talking the proceedings in the 90s?
So it's definitely it's strange. It's 86 when he dies, right? So it's like right after,
because I noticed you said he already got 6 years, so I'm like, wait,
no, he
what?
got the years, but he became willing to talk instantly. So he gets convicted with 6.5 years, but he starts running his mouth.
Should have took the fucking years, dude.
Right? And so they're like, essentially it was in 86 that he's arrested and imprisoned with Dutroux and Michelle Martin, and he makes this full confession of his involvement with Dutroux and with the abductions and the torture of these girls. And then after the release, right, he dies in this fire in his caravan, right? So he only serves Dutroux served 3 of a 13.5-year sentence. And so essentially Van Pettigem got out very quickly, right? Essentially after being convicted in 85, right? And I think that since seeing as a 13.5-year sentence only sort of led to a 3-year sort of conviction and time served with Dutroux himself, then it makes all the sense in the world that Van Peteghem would just sort of be released right after serving 6 to 8 months. I can't even remember. It wasn't very long at all. Like, I don't even remember if he got more than a year of time served, which is fascinating. You get 3.5 year
especially
sentence.
Turn around and kill him right as soon as he gets out.
And he gets out and he dies in a fire in his caravan, which is crazy.
Now, this guy had flouted about some sort of pedigree of like a paramilitary, military, something along those lines too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think they claim that he was discharged, but I can't find really much of a record. And he claimed that he was obviously a member of a paramilitary organization, which is very interesting to me, obviously, because
now, did he say which? Because I know we have, which does kind of maybe tie into a lot of this stuff later. The kind of the different weird. It kind of goes more to the Gladio aspect of all of this. Is all the different weird paramilitary organizations that we're going to probably. It's hard to keep track with the Westland Post or whatever, and so.
Yeah, I'm trying to get an actual name. It's very sparse in terms of the legitimate details about Van Peteghem, his military career. You can barely find a thing.
You'd be interested if they were tapping if we do find out. I mean, if you do dig into whatever supposed paramilitary group he may or may not have been associated with, if they're somehow associated with like the Westland New Post and all those other different organizations, that'd be interesting because that'd be another tie into the Gladio things, which it's damn near like this already. So like it'd just be one more overlapping finger essentially.
Oh yeah.
So yeah.
And allegedly, I believe it was not only did they offer to bribe one of the girls that they abducted and raped, I believe Dutroux was overheard by one of the victims. I think it was Axel. I don't know how to say her name, but Axelle, and essentially, basically they overheard Dutroux while they were being abused speak of an ex-girlfriend, and they referred to her as Maryline. Is apparently what she was referred to as. And this is an alleged ex-girlfriend of Dutroux who they claimed had been hit by a truck. And this continued to happen as well. Individuals, one person claimed that Dutroux essentially threatened to have her killed in a targeted car accident, right? So, dude, does that not remind you of Watergate as well? And yeah, Ghislaine Maxwell too, but Watergate,
although the bus thing was a little bit, now that I think about the bus, but even then it's still weird. I still have no idea what the hell happened there. So
what the Virginia Giuffre? I know, right? It's very strange, and I'm telling you, there's no reason for there to be smoke with no fire in terms of that specifically, especially you consider this tell-all post-mortem that she's allegedly having released, which to me it's like, man, come on, like this just the convenient timing of it all, right? And the reality of anyway, we can have that conversation later. It's just it's just very difficult to me to imagine that this is not a strategic sort of targeted assassination, just strategic tactic in terms of the playbook that they just recycle and reuse time and time again. And all we ever do see is, and I've used this many times in the past as an example, but it's the example that E. Howard Hunt gave, right? There's a specific angle that we have essentially perfected, and we have individual operatives that know how to basically conduct this targeted assassination and execution through what they make it look as if it's an accidental car accident, right? And essentially, in reality, they know exactly precisely which angle to strike your car at what speed, and they can effectively cause a death. Usually, I believe. I mean, obviously, it's you have sort of it's circumstantial, but at the same time, I think it's important to understand the strategy, right? And how it's been used over and over again. And yeah, Van Peteghem, he's got such a strange sort of I'm desperate to obviously just become more and more just well affiliated with some of the details if I can find more source
I mean, he
material.
admitted that Dutroux had some sort of dirt on him of some sort, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why he claimed that Dutroux had convinced him that he owes him. And so then he became willing to essentially commit targeted, prioritized child abductions, which is very strange. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Which, and we joked a little bit of that yesterday, but it's like, obviously, maybe we didn't hone it in enough, could be a little bit glib, but it's the idea, let's be real, it's blackmailed probably. Like, what did he have on him? I feel like he had to have had something on this guy, because it's
yeah.
I mean, maybe owed a favor. I mean, owing a favor, I guess, you could frame blackmail as owing a favor. Like, hey, I have this on you. You owe me a favor. So,
Right.
so you can frame it. So it's like, there's something. He's got something. He's got some sort of leverage on this guy. And given the nature of this entire story, this entire series, it calls into question what's going on here. And that's kind of thing we're digging into, just kind of trying to understand what goes on here. So we get Pedigan. Is there anything more you want to say on Pedigan? Because there's even more interesting components about these crimes, or even particularly the people who attended them.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, and just to remind everyone, the official narrative surrounding the first abduction, as far as what's on the record, June 7th, 85, right? And that's when this first proven abduction takes place. And it's of this 11-year-old girl whose name is Sylvie, and Sylvie D. Many of the victims don't have their full names attached. There's a reason for that. I think, obviously, due to the fact that they were underage at the time, it was up to the discretion of the individuals involved as the guardians, right?
Young victims of awful sexual crimes.
Yeah,
it's not
who
that
wants
crazy.
to have that attached to them in the public eye for the rest of their lives, trying to, live just an average, like, my God, I just, yeah. As often as I've said the name Regina Loof, like, imagine if your name is in this, right?
Yeah.
Like I mean, it would be that just now occurred to me how much, you know what I mean? Like, just as far as, how much that would be, just so difficult to escape. You know what I mean? It's my God. But anyway.
Well, yeah,
So,
we're dealing with the Epstein stuff now too. That's always the claim. It's like, hell, isn't there one of the big ones is I believe there's someone who filed suit, I believe under anonymous. I want to say they're 13. There's a 13-year-old one, and that's the one that has the claim against Epstein and Trump for, I forget the specifics, but something about like, pictures of like him, with young children in his lap. But I mean, obviously, it's like, to some degree, I understand that people go, this is dubious because they're being anonymous, but it's also understandable. If let's be real, if that did happen if the two of the most powerful men in the world did this to a 13-year-old, it's not that crazy that perhaps they may want a little bit of a shred of anonymity here.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, I would honestly, I it's understandable. Now, I would say my personal inclination is, generally speaking, you should probably be as loud and proud. And I understand why you wouldn't want to be, but more just for a safety concern, particularly just because you're out there. But obviously, I understand why someone would not want to drag their children through this. I totally get that.
Yeah.
So,
no doubt, man. Yeah, and I think that, and as you mentioned earlier, that the sort of third man who was implicated in being involved in some of the original abductions here in 85. It was basically, he was described as an individual in his 50s, but was never identified by the authorities at all whatsoever. But that definitely is important, I think, and worthy of note in terms of.
Was there any sort of description other than 50s? Anything?
An older man in his 50s, I believe. There was essentially, she said, I think that he was overweight, basically. Yeah, which to me.
I mean, that's not. I mean, to be fair, as I was like, wanted more. But let's be real. If we're these cast of characters, Nihul. But although, to be fair, I guess I don't even know what. Like, it doesn't. Like, these guys, these people carrying on. If anything, it'd actually be off-brand for Nihul to be carrying on in these sorts of crimes at this level.
Right.
Except for, although I guess yes and no, because the role Dutroux filled is he essentially brought the product to Nihul. So that like Nihil wouldn't be involved in any of the nitty gritty, kidnapping. I mean, he'd be involved, but in like a procuring type thing.
Right.
But so
Definitely,
far
I could
as
see
yeah,
how
so it depends what the claims are, I guess. If they're
right.
claiming that he assisted in the kidnapping, now if it's like, oh, but then they brought us and then they were talking to this guy, now then I'd be like, oh, that's Nihil. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what it was described as, that they were already abducted, brought to a
There we
location,
go.
and then
Yeah.
these conversations were happening during the abuse. And
Okay,
so
that
that's
makes
the way
sense.
it was described, right? Which
Yeah.
is, that definitely. And by the way, to have the audacity to return the children. I mean, obviously, it's better than the alternative in many different cases as far as this
Yeah.
network is being considered, But to actually have this example of the abuse taking place, and then allegedly you have the girl being returned, right, to essentially her family, and they had paid her a sum, right, this sort of a lump sum in cash, in francs, francs, whatever, and had basically, attempted to, like, just buy her silence in a way, right, which I just thought was worthy of mentioning as well, just because it seems like this is a little bit of one of at the very least, it's one of the strategies they would employ as far as during some of the victims, and the reason why they would find their ways to at the very least, they would survive their abuse and their introduction and experience with this network. And I think that that's why whenever you had Judge Conrad plead to the public, come forward, and many of these ex-victims did come forward, and that's when we started getting many of the allegations that seemed to reinforce a lot of what Regina and some of the real core members of the X dossier that were willing to go on the record and put their name and identity through this. They basically had many of their claims reinforced by some of these more anonymous types or individuals who refused to go full name on the record, which it makes sense. But the fact that you had the abductions take place, and it's Axel, right?
Mhm.
Axel,
That's the 19-year-old, right?
Yeah, she's the
Yeah.
19-year-old, and so basically she had claimed that that is when she had heard during the abuse that basically Petegem was telling her that he was a part of a gang. If you recall, that's when she had reported this to the authorities later on, and yeah, it was basically I found it interesting that Michelle Martin was also one of the key individuals mentioned as being one of the procurers and helping abduct as an accomplice these girls. So interesting in a way to where obviously remind yourself that Michelle has a background in teaching, and now all of a sudden she's a female who's far more easier at face value for young girls to trust. Right? I'm just saying, like, why else was Ghislaine going hunting for nubiles? Because young girls are far more trusting of a grown woman and that makes sense. I mean, but what also makes sense is for sinister operatives to obviously exploit and leverage that to their own benefit, and utilize that very concept, and take advantage of it. And so you have that sort of being just perfectly represented once again in this context, and really it shouldn't be all that surprising. You know what I mean? And especially when you consider the individuals who were attached to many of the different ice skating rinks that he was going to. And yeah, let me slow down for a moment just to mention the fact that obviously in '83 is when he was connected to Christine Van Hees,
Yeah, Van Hees,
which
yeah. That's
find
probably
that,
another episode on its own, honestly.
yeah,
So,
it really could be.
honestly, I mean, I don't know if it would fit if you feel like we could probably talk about it later, but it might even be worthwhile to maybe a next episode. But we can talk about that later, because it's like that was as I was thinking about that before. I was like, there's a lot to the Van Hees just on its own. So that's at least like almost half an episode on its own, just the Van Hees murder. So,
Right.
But yeah, go on. I was thinking out loud.
Good, buddy. I think that it is very important to understand that it was the Poseidon ice skating rink that he was attending basically every weekend at this time.
Yep.
And apparently Dutroux, and this is all according to Michelle Martin, visited this Poseidon ice skating rink every weekend, and this is where he would meet the 16-year-old girl named Christine Van Hees, and she was apparently frequenting this very same ice skating rink at this time in '83, and so Dutroux allegedly was going there alone, and because Michelle Martin was pregnant at the time, and so it was easier for Dutroux apparently to pick up these girls, and Bernard Weinstein is also said to have attended the Poseidon ice skating rink. I'm sorry, the accomplice that would then be later on buried alive by Dutroux himself on one of his own properties, and found and dug up and obviously revealed as being one of the individuals murdered by Dutroux, along with two of the girls who were also buried alive on that very same property, allegedly buried alive. I think that anyway, there's more details to that. I think there's actually witnesses who saw those girls being taken around town before they were potentially murdered in a snuff film, and that's what a lot of people are claiming now. And we're talking. There's evidence allegedly of Dutroux, Michelle Martin, or not, Michelle Nihul. And we'll get to that with Nihul himself. But there's video evidence allegedly of him legitimately committing murder and being a part of a snuff film himself. And I believe it was a young German kid, a young German girl, I believe. I can't recall now. But the details are, I try to... I try to not absorb them like as much as I can. It's just like it starts to get to you after a time, and so I do my
Dark tale
best
for another day in this,
Yeah,
series. Yeah,
100%, buddy.
yeah.
But it was
Actually, I was just thinking about the Christine Van Hees thing. It would actually make me even more. We were gonna have to do that way later. Now, we just have to remember to come back to it because I do think it needs to be focused on, because that'll actually make more sense when we get into the X dossier stuff to then back up and then focus on the Christine Van Hees, since it's one of the best points to kind of point to the bona fides, I guess you could say, of Virginia Loof or whatever. So or
Right.
Virginia Loof. I'm mixing up names.
Regina.
There's so many damn
Regina.
names.
You're thinking Virginia
I know. I'm mixing so many names to keep track of, and especially all the Belgian names and all that. So, anyways, I'll pass it back to you. I was kind of rambling there. Sounds to me though we're kind of getting near the end of this narrative. Is there anything particularly you want to hone in on? Because I think we're actually surprisingly pretty damn good episode. I think we hit really everything we wanted to. Had a good little exposition to go with it, to kind of pad out the sides. But I mean, is there anything in the particular? Because I think it seems like we've covered a lot of substantive stuff. Obviously, you've dug into the primary material here, so you have a better idea of what to be dissected here. But is there anything particular we're missing that you feel like we should hone in for analysis before we get out of here? Because we have at least another probably, yeah. So we
we have plenty, but I do think that we definitely at least accomplished something as far as making some legitimate headway. But yeah, I think really the only thing that I could attach very easily onto the end of this sentiment in terms of just the ice skating rink and that's outside of the Christine Van Hees connection is just the fact I had mentioned, by the way, that obviously the strange sort of weird legal influence that seemed to, at the very least, surround Dutroux anytime he had some sort of run-in leading up to, obviously, even before and after those original very extraordinary criminal charges in the 80s. I mean, he's clearly being given this sort of special treatment. And this is a great case of that happening, which is apparently it was the individual, right? His name was Devine, who was allegedly assaulted him and was the boyfriend of the individual girl who Dutroux was feeling up, right, and sexually assaulting at the Poseidon ice skating rink. And so this one actually, I believe it was the Charleroi ice rink incident, and so it's the same one, but this is in 1980, so keep that in mind. This is a few years prior, right, than when he would meet Christine Van Hees in '83. But he's still been knowingly driving around town with in a van with in a fleet of cars allegedly, but one of them being a van with a mattress in the back, which makes a lot of sense if you're considering what he's up to at these ice skating rinks, surrounding himself with easy access to children. And so basically this individual who was later on with Dutroux, this is so crazy because he's convicted of deliberate assault and battery against Dutroux. But it's strange because the entire trial and judicial system allegedly just sort of gave Dutroux a free pass, and that where they were only interested in prioritizing Debine's conviction of holding him responsible and accountable for the physical altercation with Dutroux, and not at all concerned about the alleged sexual assault incident that led to the obvious physical interaction. And so that in itself, the fact that they claimed and specifically claimed in multiple sources to this extent said that the judicial system was behaving in a strange manner surrounding this specific case in terms of Dutroux, and heavily Devine himself claims that he felt intimidated, right? And that he couldn't do anything against the charge. Now that instantly I thought, okay, there has to be this sort of like firm criminal conspiracy happening in terms of the organized crime footprint here.
We'll have to get into his representation one of these days, because I bet you there's some interesting things there.
I
so,
bet.
not
He
to
probably has
overburden
some
ourselves with shit.
Probably
but-
has some sort of Belgian Alan Dershowitz over there who's been defending
Hey,
South
yeah,
films
so,
for
I mean,
generations.
something to it. I don't know what, but it might be interesting. I mean, I don't know. There's always something interesting, the legal component there.
Here's the last part, though. This is crazy.
Yeah.
So the Court of Appeal allegedly they partially upheld the conviction of Devine. Dutroux was attempting to gain permanent incapacity for work at this moment from the slight bruise on his thumb from the attack.
He's trying to
of
get full
Devine.
disability.
Dude, so this is how.
So he's just using to advance his scam even further.
Yes,
yeah.
man. So then he gets a diagnosis from a certain doctor, and Dutroux apparently there's no real, like, Dutroux was appealing the sentence apparently because of the injury, right? There was an appeal that was happening, and Dutroux was trying to utilize this as a sort of but apparently the public prosecutor of Charleroi was involved with all of this, and this was when a court-appointed doctor, which was allegedly Dr. Bernard Manet, and he was allegedly tasked with examining Dutroux's injuries, and Debine's lawyer legitimately made a public statement saying that this entire ordeal was just one of the most strange incidents he'd ever been a part of as a legal representative, and so that, to me, it's like the fact that he used this case to actually attempt to pursue disability, and then he would obviously be granted that disability, and then utilize all of those public funds for funding the operations in the network, along with the 7 different properties and the fleet of cars, and yeah, this is a state-sponsored child trafficking operation, I think,
Yeah.
and we're just witnessing one of the low-hanging fruits that were very pivotal in the process of sort of the on-the-ground operations, and yeah, we're just going
what
to
better way to
continue
end it?
discover.
Right. Sorry,
Exactly.
I didn't mean to cut you off, but you actually you ended at the perfect stopping point, like right there, and then you.
Sure.
Sorry, I mean, maybe you had something better to say than actually stepped on it, but I was like, oh, you nailed it. So that's, I mean, but if you feel like you can add a cherry on there, you're welcome to, but otherwise. Because I accidentally stepped on you, but otherwise, let people know where you're at. Because I think you finished on just the right note.
Awesome, buddy. All right, man. You guys already know that the best place to support me is patreon.com/the Underclass Podcast. Definitely. I mean, we're gonna do another whatever this is tonight. So like 10 o'clock. So a couple hours. I'm gonna be. Who knows? We'll talk about some. Dude, did you see Did you see Rampage Jackson's son?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
yeah,
so sad, dude.
sad,
Yeah, that fucking sucks. But anyway, all right. But yeah, beyond that, you guys already know tomorrow will be already dead. This is going to be a fun one, and yeah, maybe after this week, I'm going to actually implement my strategy in terms of my scheduling process because, yeah, I got like, again, man, I scheduled 10 interviews in like a 7-day span. It's like the dumbest thing I've ever done. I finally learned my lesson, so it won't be happening in the future, and I have to breathe. But anyway,
yeah, you gotta stop being so friendly.
dude, I was like
Stop making
apologizing to
friends.
Christina the other day too. I was like, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to.
It was a good episode.
I had
but you
such
did
a
keep
good
her
time.
captive for about 2 hours.
That's how I felt too. I was like, I'm so sorry. But anyway, it was
Like I was like, is she just gonna leave? She might just leave. All right, Austin, where can did you already drop all your plugs?
I'm
Did you already
pretty sure. Either way,
Yeah.
the Underclass
Yeah.
Podcast. Go check it out, guys.
Yeah, for those who want to support what I'm doing, leave a like, share, subscribe, comment, leave a 5-star review on iTunes or Spotify. If you want to support me monetarily, the best way you can do that is over at patreon.com/nowayjose2020. That's the best way to support me, but I understand if you can't. But I do try to give you back your value through a few different ways. The lowest level at $2, you get access to the early episodes, just like this one. I usually do about 1 to 2 of those a week. You keep about 4 or so of those behind the paywall at any given time. I mean, give or take. Give me some leeway. I'm about one man. You also get access to the Telegram. You also get access to the ad-free RSS feed. You also get access to the pre-show and priority for the call-ins of me and Austin's weekly live call-in show, Already Dead, which is on Tuesdays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. And also the highest level, I give a big shout out to them because I love them and they give me the most money, so I love them more. And I'm just kidding. I appreciate you guys for your support. My previous co-host on Tower Gang at Learn to Toad, also at AbrigadiZ, at ZLVRCK, at _Infant Seal, Tim Tuttle, at John Klebold, RIP homie, although you're still with us. You're not actually dead. I'm just being silly. But although we do miss you. Will Bell, Joseph Blueberry Rabbit, I want. By the way, that intro, that was Tim Tuttle. So we do miss you, buddy. That was a fire intro. And then big fan of the show, Torme, at Wayne Taculus, and then not Masad. And if you guys want to add your name or some funny thing that's the patron level, like the one guy says not Masad. But with that, guys, we're going to get out of here. We'll bring another one of these to you soon. And me and Austin will be doing our call-in show tomorrow, and we look forward to that. Love you all. Bye-bye.